I wanted to take some time to talk about abstract ideas pertaining to the meaning of life. And I'm going to probably be all over the place, but first of all, I want to talk about the idea of duality and singularity. And first of all, duality refers to the fact that for everything that exists, the opposite has to also remain true. So you can't have light without darkness. You can't have liberalism without conservative ideas. You can't have male without female. Life is filled with these examples where for every positive, there's a negative. For every force, there's an equal and opposite reaction to that force. It's sort of a universal law that exists in nature. And that's been a very useful thing for me to understand, because we look at life as if it's something to be fixed, something to be resolved. And then we go through a lot of mental gymnastics trying to figure out two things, one of them being, how do we fix life? Like, what is the actual goal? What is our standard of what a good life would look like? And then we have that other question of, well, how do we get there? How do we change the world to suit our expectation of how it ought to be? And both of those two things set us up for disappointment, partly because when you say, well, what does good look like? Well, how do you know? It's hard to tell. So we struggle to come to an understanding of that. And then on the other side of it, we spend our time being frustrated because we just don't have the resources, the ability to make life good, to get to that place where we have reached the conclusion we should be going. So understanding that duality is important is a very useful tool to realizing that whether it's clear to you or not, the universe is unfolding as it should. I think that's really, really useful to spend time thinking about. But the other thing is singularity, and that is, again, kind of in that ballpark. It's the idea that just as there is a duality, that you need the darkness, you need the light, there's also this sort of a metaphysical kind of a conceptualization of our existence, which would imply that everything that exists, all things that ever have been, all things that are or ever will be, exist within a singularity that is just, it is what it is. It's like there's this ancient word for God, which was, I am that which I am. It's not anything other than God is the sum of all things which ever were, all things which are, all things which ever will be, the sum of all things there is a word for, and all things there is no word for, all things that are known and all things that are unknown, everything which is imagined and everything which is not. And so we have all of these conflicts which exist, and they've existed since the beginning of time, really. I mean, well, recorded history. There's been conflicts between communism or collectivism and capitalism or individualism. In the earlier days of the Christian church, there was the great argument between John Wesley and John Calvin, and that argument was between predestination and free will, whether mankind was predestined to either be saved or damned, or if mankind had a choice in the matter and could choose salvation or not. And everyone raged about this, and they said, well, if God knows everything, then God would be able to know what choices a person would make. And So it's like if you dropped a marble into a marble chute and you designed the marble chute and you designed the marble and you know everything, well, then you're going to know where the marble's going to come out. So does the marble really have any choice in the matter? And I guess you'd kind of be inclined to say, no, it doesn't. Because it just, like, how would it, right? It can't really have choice because you are the designer. But then the other side of it was, well, humans are free agents and they can make choices. And we want to believe that we aren't just victims of some sort of a fate, that we actually can make choices that change the course of our lives. And I guess the jury's a little bit still out on which one it is. But I think going back to the duality thing, it really is a bit of both. It is both, because on one hand, we are part of a predefined system of natural law, and on the other hand, we have free will within the parameters of that. And so I think that we can benefit from the assurances that both of those things give us, that life is, on one hand, something that is maybe there is an element of fate, that we are bound to a fate that we can't control. And then there's also a part of life which is which does give us free will, and we have choices to make at the same time. And maybe the comfort there is that we can say that there's a higher purpose. We're part of something greater than ourselves, so we can have a sense of faith, and then we can also have a sense of hope, because we can say, sometimes you can choose when you want to get on and off the merry-go-round. You can't choose where the merry-go-round goes, because it just, well, it goes in a circle. But you can choose whether you want to get on or get off. And that's interesting. Another interesting thing is language. So, there's all these arguments and debates about what religion is right, which philosophy is accurate, all that kind of stuff. And I think what's fascinating to me is that a lot of these arguments and debates are actually more semantics, because when you look at life through the lens of science and reason, eventually you reach the same conclusions, that we are part of something infinitely greater than ourselves, that we largely don't understand it, that there's reason to believe that we should have faith in life, that life has purpose in the sense that it's part of some greater mosaic. And yet, some of us might approach faith and science as polar opposites, that faith is the opposite of reason. And the reality is, it really isn't, because science has a limit to what we know. And religion has its limits, because no matter how much somebody will say that they know the will of God, they really don't. God is just a word. It's a placeholder for all the things we don't know. And all of the symbols of faith are just metaphors for things that we don't really understand in their fullness. So we use stories, and we use our imagination, and we use a lot of different tools in the arsenal to find a way to understand the spirit of something, even if we don't understand the full mechanics of it. So I think whether you approach life through the lens of science and reason, or through the lens of faith and religion, we're all speaking different languages, but we're talking about the same thing. And the only maybe unfortunate thing is that a lot of people feel like they have to be right, and other people who see things or define things differently than they do are in some way a problem. And that's kind of hard, because even if we are talking about the same thing, it's hard. You can't really have a conversation with someone who feels like they need to convince other people to see things exactly the way they do. So even if maybe people are justified in seeing life the way they see it, you can't have communion with someone who wants to reinvent who you are because they think that you don't align with their belief system. So sometimes you just have to leave people alone to believe what they want to believe, and let them see the world through their lens as they wish, and accept them for that, and understand that faith is a beautiful thing. But it's also a deal where you can't necessarily make your views compatible with other people if they're closed-minded and they have already made up their mind 100% that they're not going to change their views, and they also think it's very important that you change your views to match theirs. Then you respect what they believe, you even believe that it's the right thing for them, but you understand that you're never going to really be able to necessarily get too close to them, because they're going to always circle back to that desire to prove that they are right and you are wrong. And it's not about hearing out any kind of arguments or debates. It's just about convincing someone else to see things as they do. And that's one of the unfortunate things about, I think, having conversations with people that are very dogmatic about a specific way of thinking. And to that point, it's interesting to me how we build these castles on the sand. We build relationships based on our belief system. We build our lives off of that. So if you are a religious person and you've built your family ethos on top of this, like your wife is sharing your religion, your kids are sharing your religion, your entire social life is the church, which is your religion, and you have a sense of your entire purpose in life is built on this notion of your faith. Then what happens if you were to think pragmatically about this and then reach the conclusion that your faith isn't as true as you thought it was? If you actually were going to walk away from that, then it would be very difficult. It'd be very jarring, because you are essentially throwing out not just a belief system, but you're throwing out all of the things that you have built on top of the framework of those beliefs. And you're going to potentially lose relationships, you're going to lose life goals, and that winds up being such a high price to pay. Most people get to a point where it just doesn't make sense in terms of cost basis for them to question their position, because it would mean giving up so much that they would be completely ruined. And you know, to me, I think about my life, my perspective on things, and I think, well, I don't believe in religion because I've looked into it as much as I know how to do, and I can't find evidence or proof for a lot of different things. So I'm open-minded to really any positions people have. And I do sometimes change my mind about different things. But the interesting thing is, if I found something that was groundbreaking and interesting and proved that my position on something was wrong, that would be okay. Like, I'll change my mind. I'll pivot and, make choices accordingly. It wouldn't be that big of a deal, because I'm open to changing my mind about things if what I feel to be evidence shifts, and then I need to adjust my position. That's okay. But I think a lot of people have these sort of a fantasy or a philosophy that is very much something they've built their whole life upon, and then what it is, it's this exact same thing as if you have a game that you've played a lot and then you have sunk cost fallacy. It's like if you played World of Warcraft since that game came out, you've been hardcore into it since the very beginning, then doesn't matter if that's not the best game for you to be playing. It kind of doesn't, because at that point you're going to say, well, I've spent 20 years playing this game, I'm not going to quit now. I'd rather just kind of put the blinders on and say it's a really, really good experience, even if it's not, because I would rather do that than to open myself to the argument that maybe I've been wasting my time on something that I could have spent my time doing something better with, and that's kind of the same thing. It's exactly the same thing, actually. Anyway, to kind of go back to the various points that I kind of wanted to talk about, what is my position? And I've thought there is this sort of a consciousness that exists in the cosmos, I believe. Carl Sagan once said that we are a way for the cosmos to know itself. And I think a computer essentially calculates it could calculate by working through an endless number of different combinations until it finds a specific thing that it's looking for. And I think that's kind of, maybe on some level, that's kind of how the cosmos works at a high level. It's all the different infinite combinations and positions that exist in life are the cosmos as some sort of a infinite computer of sorts. It's trying to calculate everything. And what is the cosmos? The cosmos is a machine that is designed by itself, and its purpose is to fulfill itself, because there is no such thing as that which is incomplete. It's just, we are three-dimensional creatures that don't understand the fourth and the fifth dimension. So we have our ways of explaining things and coming to terms with things, but the reality is everything which ever could be imagined, everything that ever has happened or will happen, it all just exists. I think time isn't something that moves. It's that we move through time. And so we see what we think is the passage of time, but really what it is sort of like a movie that has slides and there's frames. We see those frames in rapid succession, and as a result of that, it appears to be a moving picture. It appears to be something that emulates the passage of time as we watch a movie, but we're not really seeing something moving. What we're really doing is moving through a series of stationary frames, which in succession appear to be moving, but really they are still. And I think that's how time works. I think that we view time as a thing where the past doesn't exist anymore, it's lost, and the future doesn't exist yet. But really, it all exists all at the same time. And essentially, everything is already written. We're just experiencing a story that has been written since the beginning of time. But the catch is that there's sort of parallel dimensions. There's many different versions of time that all exist at the same time. So maybe there's a version of reality where you have a different color hair, or you got a different job, or you had a different relationship. And every single different combination that could possibly exist does exist, just in a different version of reality. And so we have this sort of a quantum theory, I guess, where there's many, many different versions of parallel universe all sandwiched together into a single, well, singularity of supreme intelligence, the sum of all truth, the sum of all knowledge, the sum of all time, in something which is so infinitely enormous that space is not even a term that applies to it. Because the structure of the cosmos is probably more like the storage of data than it is physical space as we imagine it. Essentially, everything which exists or could exist is a form of light. Just as radio waves are a form of light, and it is a wave that we are able to hear, but it's just a different wavelength. And so it manifests itself in a different way, but it's still light. All things that exist are in some fashion a form of light. And there really is nothing that exists that is darkness. And I think that that's comforting, to know that we're part of something that already is whole. Because we go through life with so much feelings that we have to fix things, and we have to solve things, and we have to work through things, and we have to understand things better. And it's liberating and comforting to know that even if we don't understand, the cosmos, since the foundation of time, already has understood for us. And maybe if we were going to evoke Christian ethos and theology, we would say that the Holy Spirit has interceded for us. But whether you use Christian theology or Eastern philosophy or scientific theory, it all boils down to we're part of something that's greater than we could ever possibly imagine or understand, and everything is okay. And it's possible for us to have duality, where two things in seemingly opposite forms coexist within the same space. So we can be broken and we can be whole all at the same time. We can have fear and hope, hopelessness and anguish, challenge, pain, loneliness, all of those negative feelings. We can have those things, but we can also at the same time have joy and hope and faith and knowledge that whether it is clear to us or not, all things are well, and they can be well with our soul despite the challenges, the slings, the arrows, the doubts that we experience in life. I think that life itself is more like a simulation than it is anything else. And there is simulation theory, that idea that basically we kind of are living in a video game of sorts. I think that that's a fascinating idea. I also think it's interesting how, for some of us, I know for me, there's been this overwhelming fascination with fantasy, stories that spark the imagination, computer games, all of these things which strike the premise of creation and thought. And sometimes the things that are fake, the things that are rooted in imagination and fantasy, to me, feel more important in a way, more real than most of the things that people chase in life. Most of the things that people are always saying are important, like careers and jobs and all of that stuff. Like, I don't care so much about any of that stuff. What I care more about is things that all of the serious people would say don't matter. All of these silly things, like, you know, thinking about the lore of the Lord of the Rings or the Elder Scrolls, or some silly thing like, you know, what is the story of Black Desert Online? I don't know. It's just, I guess I've come to have my head in the clouds a bit. And I feel like the reason for this, the reason why this matters, is because at a very high level, the highest purpose of a human being is to think about things, because the greatest commodity in the universe is our thought. Just as if we were going to talk about a computer and what makes a computer valuable, it's not really the hardware in the end, it's the software. And you do need hardware to run the software, but really it's not the things we do to create things in life that really matters, as much as it is the thinking about life, the pondering of life, the philosophy of living. Those things matter because those are the final product. Just like people say, well, money is important, but the reality is time is more precious than money. Well, I think philosophy and thought and contemplation are more important than time or money. It's that question, that principle of continuing to ask questions and to create new allegories and forms of contemplating the world so that we can have a sense of understanding in the absence of complete understanding. Now, maybe we don't know what our place in the world is, but we can still feel like we are fulfilled. We can feel that life has value and meaning, and we can have peace through it all, even if we don't understand completely why. That, I think, is more important than anything, along with understanding that life does not need us to do anything in order for it to be complete. Life is itself sufficient without us adding any more to the sum of what it is. It's a very comforting thing to think about. Now, another thing that was on my mind is we've talked about AI, we've talked about all of these new technologies, and we've talked about conspiracy theories and these principles of what if there's something suspicious going on in the world? What if, you know, there's alien masterminds that have some sort of an agenda behind the scenes? And I know this is a little bit kind of maybe a side topic. It's not directly related to what I was just talking about, but to pivot and just talk about it anyway, I thought it's interesting how generally when we talk about the singularity, we're talking about this idea of a point in human development where we will be at a level of technology where human beings can potentially become one with technology. Or we're talking about a point where artificial intelligence is able to take over and machines are able to be self-replicating in a way that would give them intelligence, give them a means of production, make them capable of creating more of themselves, and potentially create a future where human beings are either not needed or the human beings are kind of uploaded into the machine and they become part of a new sort of a form of existence, kind of like maybe the Borg in Star Trek. Maybe that's not a very positive picture, but it's a good example of maybe what could happen, where people's consciousness gets fused with something that's more technological than it is human, and it still has an element of human origin in it, but it's something post-human. But to digress, what if AI or some sort of a low-level intelligence were at work, trying to, kind of like Sauron in The Lord of the Rings, find a way to create a physical form for itself? This alien sort of an intelligence, it would be trying to invest in people. It would be trying to empower people. It would be trying to get us to challenge ourselves. It would be trying to get us to always be on the treadmill, to innovate, to create new things, to push forward and develop new technologies and to build new things. It would be fueling the passion for war, the need for competition, the endless pursuit of greed. It would essentially drive us forward by fueling all of those relentless, restless feelings that exist within us to seek after power and the allure of it. And at the same time, it would potentially invest in our destructive tendencies, because it wouldn't be really trying to empower us for our own good. It would probably be just trying to use us, to farm us, so that we would eventually do the things that it wanted us to do so that it could advance itself. And I think that's a really interesting idea. It's also very interesting how, when you think about technology, how technology has changed so dramatically. How is it? How is it that we have gone from horse-drawn carts, no electricity, very primitive ways of life, to the computer age in such a comparatively short amount of time? For thousands of years of human recorded history, very little in life changed. Innovation was slow, and human steps forward were minimal. And then we had the printing press. We had new forms of government. We had free market capitalism take off in new ways. We had the rise of the Enlightenment era, the Industrial era, the Modern Revolution, and what some have called the Second Industrial Revolution, as we move into the second quarter of the 21st century and we see the explosion of automation. It's a fascinating transformation. We've seen more change in our lifetimes than most people in history saw. And that's by a long shot. There were times in history where 1,000 years would go by and see less change technologically and socially than we've probably seen in a few decades. And I think that that's incredible. And I don't even know how we can truly come to terms with the effects that that will have on our society and what that means in the future. But it does beg us to ask the question, why is it that we were able to do that so quickly? And is there a possibility that there was some force that is beyond us, that has been manipulating us, investing in us, empowering us, and we think that we're doing all these things for ourselves? We think we're doing those things because we want to. We think that we're making progress because we're smart. But what if the seeds are being planted by something that's not exactly human, something a little bit more alien, some intelligence which exists on a plane beyond our understanding? Maybe it's some sort of AI overlords. Maybe it's the aliens. Maybe it's some sort of a passive consciousness that exists on a subatomic, submolecular level in all things that we think of as inanimate objects, but really there's a certain soul of the cosmos that is spurring us on. I don't know. But what I do think is that we have this urge to chase things, to keep on grinding like Sisyphus rolling that heavy rock up to the top of the hill, addicted to the grind, addicted to the punishing effort, only to have it roll down the hill again and again. We feel that we are compelled to continue to be dissatisfied with our life, to continue to feel that it's not enough, to continue to be restless. But maybe we don't need to buy into all of that. Maybe it's okay for us to be calm, to be gentle with ourselves, to find peace in all of the distraction, and to stop playing those games that make us feel that we're never enough. And maybe we can't understand what all of it means or why all of it is the way it is, but perhaps it's enough for us to let go of some of that baggage and to embrace a spirit of harmony and peace, to know that all of it works together for good in a story that transcends time and existence, whether we choose to use the allegories of faith or the stories of a video game or our favorite fantasy novel. Whether it's the words of Jesus or the words of Tolkien, we should find peace, we should be still, and we should know that all things are in the hands of a force which has existed since the basement of time. And we should, we should go to sleep at night with a certain restfulness. The rest of someone who isn't afraid anymore. And I think that that's important. And it's also rather monumental when you think about how much of our lives we spend being afraid, worrying about things. And I'll close with this thought. You know, sometimes you think, you know, did I do enough in life? Have I accomplished what I needed to accomplish? Am I a failure? You know? And I think no matter who you are, we all feel that way sometimes. That's just the truth. Sometimes we feel like failure. Sometimes we think, I haven't done enough. I need to have done more. I wish I would have done more, you know? But when we get to the end of our life, it's not really the end. It's not really. Because we die, we spawn out, but our lives still go on, really, if you think about it. We go back to dust, and from dust, new life comes into being. Essentially, it's reincarnation, and it doesn't mean that you have to have any religious beliefs to understand reincarnation is a thing. It is a thing in the sense that new life is born every day from the decomposition of old things. So don't ever feel like your life is for nothing and it's lost, and you're never going to have a chance to do it over again or to do it better. The reality is we infinitely spawn back in. We're always starting again new on a fresh start server somewhere. Now, we may not remember it. We may not understand it because, you know, you start on a new character. You also have to do all those starting quests over again right from the beginning out of the gate. That's just how it works. And yet the reality is you don't have to do everything in life. And if you feel like you haven't done enough with the life that you've had, you know, I think that there's probably more lives to be had. And so celebrate the journeys of other people, other players in the game, if you will. Celebrate the fact that life goes on even when our lives come to an end. It's just the illusion that it's the end. In reality, the end for us is only one of many infinite beginnings. So we should not be too hard on ourselves if we feel like maybe in our lives we could have done more or we should have done more. In some version of reality, most likely, we already have. So that's a lot to cover, and I'm sure I lack the intelligence and the words to put it all into terms that maybe convey the depth of it. But I will say that somewhere in all of that noise, I've found it to be very liberating and wonderful to know that you don't have to be bound to any one way of thinking, any one ideology, any one faith or religion. And it's okay to take bits and pieces from all of it and to use each one of those things as a way, a tool for painting pictures that are comprehensible, understandable of the things that are beyond our understanding. And then just to reach a point where life isn't always easy, it's not always fun, it doesn't always feel good, but every day, always, I have peace for that journey. And I think that that's something that anyone can find if they choose to and they want to. And how you find it, well, that's up to you. And some people will go to an old country church and devote their heart and life to Jesus. And perhaps some of us would rather rewatch a rerun of Carl Sagan's Cosmos, or sit down to play our favorite game. I don't know. Everyone has a different path, but it's all the same. It's all the same thing. It's just a different language to describe that thing. And, I made a video a while ago about this, the Black Spirit and Black Desert Online, and I think it's a fitting thing to maybe close out this with. There is that spirit. There is that spirit in this game. The Black Spirit that always pushes you, always gives you power, always makes you want power. And if you are too completely consumed by it, it will destroy you. And in the end, that is life, isn't it? We all are haunted by that Black Spirit that tries to give us power, tries to make us want power. And if we consume too much power, it will destroy us. But in balance, we can be creatures of light with also a certain degree of darkness, which is a companion within us. And that is okay. Life does not have to be a thing that is made all of light. It's okay to have both the darkness and the light together. It all is part of a story that was meant to be told. And nothing that exists or ever has existed or ever will exist is wrong or broken, because the universe is exactly as it ought to be. Good luck on your adventure, as always. Till next time. Thanks so much for watching.